Hallo, guten Abend. Ich begrüße euch zum ICST Artist Talk. Schön seid ihr hier. Den heutigen Vortragenden muss man in dieser Runde fast nicht vorstellen. Ich tue es trotzdem, Manolo Müller. Computermusiker, Komponist, Klangkünstler, Audio, Software, Entwickler. Manolo machte sein Grundstudium in Bern an der HKB Sound Arts und kam anschließend zu uns hier nach Zürich für seinen Master, den er im September brillant abgeschlossen hat. Seine Masterarbeit handelte von Dekorrelation in mehrkanaliger Musik, den Wahrnehmungsphänomenen, die damit verbunden sind, und dem Einsatz dieser Technik als kompositorisches, ästhetisches Mittel. Er hat das anhand einer Komposition von Horacio Vagione exemplifiziert, einer Komposition, die Vagione hier in Zürich mal in einer Artist Residence komponiert hat. Und wir freuen uns sehr, dass du hier bist. Vielen Dank und sind gespannt auf deine Ausführungen.
Ja, danke Philipp für die sehr ausführliche Einführung. Und nachdem du jetzt eigentlich fast mein ganzes Pulver schon verschossen hast, wollte ich zuerst noch fragen, ob alle Englisch verstehen. No? Sorry. Because I think there's some people that would be more comfortable with English. And I also wrote my script in English, so it's going to be in English anyway. But I just wanted to ask for politeness' sake. So it's going to be in English. Okay, so yeah, as Philipp already said, I studied sound arts in Bern and then electroacoustic composition here, graduated last September. And during my studies, I focused mostly on acousmatic music. That means I was working on individual pieces of music for fixed media. So I was mostly working with sound recordings that I made myself or getting from other sources, but mostly really cheap handheld recordings that I made on my phone. And then basically I just arranged these into compositions on my laptop, typical laptop musician basically. And most of them were in stereo and intended for multi-channel diffusion with multi-channel loudspeaker setup. That means that you can take your stereo file and distribute it like dynamically live over multiple speakers to have a spatial impression. So the aspect of space was always kind of present in my work here in Zurich. Yes, and I also perform electronic music live, not live electronic music, but electronic music that I perform live with synthesis and like semi-generative, semi-instrumental strategies. That means like a lot of things are controlled by randomness or like by variation that the computer does itself, but I have a couple of these things on stage and I interact with them. Also, preferably in multi-channel if available, but I can also do stereo with that kind of stuff. And so maybe in beforehand, what might be important to know is that I have the strong suspicion that my original interest in electronic and then electroacoustic and then computer music was basically just an outlet for an underlying obsession with actually just working with computers that started early in childhood. So if you give your kids unrestrained computer access as a kid, it might lead to some interesting life choices later on. But before I was doing music, I was already exploring software for diverse purposes, not only like creatively, but also just recreationally. It was basically my biggest hobby, using computers, as well as programming, which I have been doing for much longer than I actually had been engaging in music making or even in so-called composing. And because of this, I also never really focused particularly on written music in the sense of more traditional scores, that kind of thing, and the canon of like of Western art music, which is a bit of a gap, I must admit, that I kind of have come to regret sometimes in some aspects, that I didn't study more classical stuff. But this is just for the background so that you kind of know, because it can be hard to talk about composing without kind of knowing what the person means by this. But yeah, still, through the studies that I did, I have gained a certain understanding of what composition or being a composer could mean for me, which includes mostly two main aspects of formulating my thoughts, experiences, and interests, both of which I will try to touch on in this talk. I mean, it's pretty short, but I will kind of try. And to characterize this a bit more, there's like, on one hand, I have this more research-based practice, which springs from the aforementioned interest in computer systems and technical exploration. And this process, it could be characterized as lying somewhere between aimless wandering. Basically, you have the computer, it's kind of a blank slate, you can do kind of whatever and just throw things around and look at them. And then on the other hand, there's like more systematized or like more formalized, like prodding and poking really deeply into systems, like trying to understand how something works or how one may put something together, basically. And these kinds of projects are also mostly not oriented toward a concrete output or goal or product, as the insight, or more likely the confusion that I gain from looking at complicated things or also simple things, are for me like kind of their own reward, or you build kind of this it's just how knowledge can be produced in this kind of context of working with computers, because they can be very productive environments. They can also be stifling because of problems of perfectionism and that kind of stuff, and wanting to finish something completely. But it's kind of inside of this dichotomy that I do computer stuff. And that doesn't mean that it's like completely just, I just do something on the computer and then I shelve it or I delete it or something. I'm kind of drawn to this like repurposing small sonic artifacts, or like detritus, something that just like a little leftover from some process that you worked on 4 years ago, and then you find a file somewhere, or you try and get it working again and have just like one short sound and then integrate that into a composition again. Or even thinking, okay, exactly this little small part of a thing that you were looking at, it's actually quite interesting and you could make a whole piece out of this. And I will talk about this later because this happens all the time, and I think many people recognize this if you work in that way. So yeah, the activities are also never truly finished, which is kind of cool because you always have some abandoned project lying around somewhere if you're bored, so you can always pick up something and work on something again, because it also doesn't have to be polished, right? If you can use it and you don't intend to like make a thing that other people can use, then for your own purpose, if you understand it, it can be really productive to make these little things. So that's like the more research or like coding as practice side. And the other side could be characterized more as the composition part, which is what I studied here, not software. Like really focusing on making pieces, which I mostly only really do if I have a fixed time frame in mind. So that means both organizationally, I have a deadline, like you have 3 months, and then also the time frame of the piece itself. Okay, how much music can I reasonably make in that time frame, like what kind of what fits in, like what do I want to express and how can I reach this goal like in this given time. And this is essentially what I was focusing on the last 3 years, because here also it's like it's not really like real life simulation. You have like fixed dates for concerts, which is kind of nice because that also means you have like because I was producing pieces at a fixed rate kind of, which for me at least is like super enabling for actually finishing a piece of music. So maybe now, so that we can also get closer to actually hearing something, I will talk shortly about these pieces that I made during the master, and So I made 6 pieces, and 3 of them form a triptychon, so with like 3 tableaus. And they focused on different aspects of landscapes in sound, like sonic landscapes, and also could be characterized like as utopic in some sense, like in the sense of the world of like fictional places, not, I don't mean it like judgmentally, but like places that aren't. That's what a utopia kind of is. And as this process of making these pieces went on, it was quite linearly, like from the first to the last piece that just composed them through. I started more and more to also integrate instrumental sounds. And the idea was then to have a sort of merging between environmental and instrumental sounds into a bit more of like one entity. And also the question of like plausibility, how plausible is a certain space if you create in the computer or if you work on tape or whatever. You can create space in many different ways, but if you make a certain space, like how can you characterize it then as being utopic, a non-place, or how could you characterize it as being a realistic place? And I mean this not like as in, you know, simulation, like simulating a high fidelity acoustic environment, but this is more of a musical question. And also this is a question for instrumental sounds, because instrumental sounds because they're produced by resonating bodies mostly, they have certain limitations. And in the computer or on tape or whatever, I keep on saying computer, you can kind of transcend this object maybe, or like make the instrumental sound less plausible so that you wouldn't say, okay, I can say exactly this is a piano or whatever, and maybe we just have to listen to it because it's kind of hard to explain, sorry. So I will just show 3 excerpts, one after the other, if that's fine for you. And also other question, because of the light, will it mess with the cameras if I put it on like less bright light? Is that okay? Okay. Yeah, so this was like the second part of the first piece. I can't actually pronounce the title because it's a bit complicated. It's a random mesh of characters, basically. Really sorry for that one. And yeah, it's like super short, and this is like the whole piece kind of is like this. And it goes by really quickly. It was also kind of intended. It's like a bit of a. I tried to do like a bit of a sound design flex as well, and this was also before the idea that I make this like bigger form. And I had this piece, and it was like, okay, this is the first piece that I have, and that I enjoy, and it's like, okay, it's done. And then Gemon, my mentor, was encouraging me to like expand my thinking about form. So that was actually where the decision came from, to make 3 pieces. So I have to concede that there is like, at some times the relationship between the pieces can seem like a bit strenuous or like not really there. It's more of that the pieces were made in short succession to each other, and I always had the other pieces in mind while I was, or the previous pieces in mind when I was doing the next one. And also some sonic similarities. Is the volume okay like this? Okay, cool. So I will show now an excerpt from the second one, which also starts which is more explicit in both the sense of instrumental sound or harmonic sound, and as well the environmental stuff. So, yeah, as I said, this is more, I think this is more explicit and explicitly landscape because of like all the direct sound references, but also there are like, maybe also you can hear it in this last sound, these more abstract sounds that also reminisce, that are reminiscences of the previous piece, and some individual gestural elements which kind of fit into this more gestural language of the first piece. But yeah, what is new is like the explicit, also kind of explicit use of pitch, and also wanting to find out how can I order pitch, which here is more of kind of like a bit spectral approach, not very deeply, but basically just by thinking of different overtone layers, which I think is a pretty effective, but also it's pretty simple if you do stuff with numbers a lot anyway, because then you kind of can think in these like relationships between numbers, but you can also hear it really well, and it's kind of transparent what is happening, like if you organize pitches via the overtone scales, in my opinion. Yes, and so and then for the third piece, I think we're gonna listen to a bit longer part. Here the references to instruments are a lot more explicit. The whole process of this triptychon felt a bit to me like I was also a bit getting from a sort of hyper sound design musique concrète point to a more gradually more and more anecdotal state, where also I kind of tried that. So some instrumental references, some instrumental sounds really are also meant to be perceived anecdotally, as in Luc Ferrari, when there are certain bird elements that you can hear both as a musical succession of intervals, but also just as a bird. So this is like this mixture of these two strata that I was talking about before, about this locking in between environmental sound and an instrumental identity or harmonic layers. And we're just gonna listen to the next excerpt. So yeah, I think it's maybe not clear, but that this was kind of this plan that you have this sort of that these two worlds kind of approach each other we have this like with this horn chord, which is really more, it's like a statement and it's a very stable block of like, yeah, of basically pitch information. But it approaches this kind of landscape sound, also with these glissando figures of like the Doppler effect of cars passing by. They approach each other from one side, from both sides. So like the chords become more glissando-like and more like this contour, this figure, and from the other side as well. There's this moment when the chord reappears as basically the same glissando figure with the same envelope that like a bypassing car has. Not that I'm like a super huge fan of bypassing cars, but it's more about this musical form and about how it can be embedded into the rest of the space, which I established by using these field recordings. And as well, having this the plausibility aspect of course, the piano sound. It's not very stable because I do something with it that it can't do, which is pitch bend or glissando upwards, and also extending the range of its sustain, like how long the sound sustains. This is kind of what I meant also with the plausibility aspect of the instrumental identities. Yes, any questions about this, or else I will move on then. I played this on a setup. By the way, maybe just like quick crappy phone picture. This is Concertsaal 1. Oh great, it's really small. Gosh, sorry. Wow, much better. So this is in Concertsaal 1, and basically you only see a small part of the setup, and basically we have like this mixing desk is kind of like the instrument, and from here I can decide on which loudspeaker the stereo file is being played, and it's all the loudspeakers here were organized in stereo pairs, so you always have a symmetrical arrangement. Left, right, left, right, left, right, and I can kind of distribute the sounds and accentuate some figures which are already kind of there. So the spatial aspect in this music is not really composed in that way that I define, now I want the sound to go like this, or I want to do a spiral in 3D and go up there or whatever, but there is kind of in certain of these gestures, like for example, this kind of glissando figure, there is a latent spatiality which I at least would perceive, and I can identify in the sound, okay, this contour kind of works with a certain kind of movement, and then I will accentuate this movement. And of course, it's not me who came up with this. This is basically the French school of acousmatic music, which comes from, among others, the GRM, which have pioneered also these multi-speaker approaches where you also, I did it kind of like you have these speakers, they are not only different from their location, they're also different from how well they produce certain frequencies and how direct they are. So I can have, with these three stereo pairs, I can have differing degrees of how wide my image sounds, and also the width, and also kind of these sounds a bit crappier than these, obviously, because I found them on the street, but they have a really interesting color. If you place them like this wide apart, they have a nice color. If they're super close to you, they sound terrible. So you can kind of exploit these particularities of your speakers, particularities of your room, and also this, for example, is like a tweeter thing. It's only tweeters, so only high frequencies above 2000 hertz, so basically just the birds. And this is really interesting because the sound they produce is really not voluminous at all, but because they're in the audience, if you accentuate them, it sounds as if only the high frequencies are inside of the audience and the rest is farther away. Yeah, and for more information on that, you probably have to ask Axel, because he's more the expert than me on that. But yeah, that's basically just the performance instrument that I use, and I have to find the mouse. Okay, here it is again. Yeah, so maybe next topic, only briefly because of time reasons. The topic also that Philip said shortly is of my master's thesis was this piece by Horacio Vagione, which is called Schimmel 2, and which was composed here in 2015. And basically what I was interested in is that it's a piece for 8 loudspeakers that he did, and apparently he has done already quite some pieces for like a multi-channel setup, but you can't find them anywhere, because also Vagione admits that when he finishes a piece, he lets them, he drops them, and he also doesn't really care if they are archived or something in any way. But presumably he has these 8-channel files at home or in his archives. But this piece I could actually get my hands on to analyze. So I could see, also this is because I admire his music, and I wanted his stereo pieces I admire, and I wanted to find out how this holds up, like what kind of strategies does he use to make a multi-channel piece. I can also I will make it really simply because I can give you the text of the master's thesis if you're really interested. So yeah, but it's basically how he makes spatial sound experiences is that he takes a single sound and duplicates the sound on multiple speakers, and on every speaker the sound is a bit later, so he just kind of shifts the times around, which kind of looks like this, super retrographic. So the upper is the left channel and the lower is the right channel, and everything is just time shifted, which is indicated by the angle of these lines. And what happens is that due to the way our ears work, is that this time shift we interpret as the sound having a direction or a spatiality. This is because because of the inherent symmetry in the human body, so you have a separation between your ears of about 17 centimeters. So if something comes from here, it will arrive first in this ear and then on that ear, and it is precisely this time difference, interoral time difference, which helps localize a sound source. And to grossly oversimplify, by the way, because it's unfortunately a lot more complicated than this, but this is one of the basic things about this. So conversely, you can also synthesize this effect, and you can make a musical spatial effect by doing this with just the monoson, which is exactly what he does. So this looks like this, for example. This is just one sound, and the purple one is the left channel, and the red one is the right channel, and they're just offset by a certain amount of milliseconds, like a short time frame. And then in multi-channel, it's like this. You just do the same thing, but in different channels. So in more channels, I would have to say. So this sound and this sound, these are all the same, but they're just time shifted by differing amounts. And this is left, right, left, right. So what you kind of have is this impression that the sound travels or has a certain direction that it's like first it's to the left and then it's to the left but more behind. And you can't really say like where it actually is, because these time frames are really not very precise. He just finds out the times that he has to take by listening to the material and really just taking this material and dragging it around. And this is just what his sessions look like, just thousands of clips and all just slightly rearranged. So you can imagine that after I actually had to analyze this, the piece is quite long and everything is treated in this way, you might be able to understand that I absolutely did not want to incorporate this technique into my music right away, because I really need to recover first. Because it's really, you have to read the thing, because I was going quite insane with it, I think, because it was just so much. The piece, it's like everything is decorrelated in these ways and there's always patterns. Like that's why I also drew these kinds of graphics. Oh, okay, this is the same as this, and this is like this, and this. And it has almost nothing to do with perception, even though it's a perceptually motivated approach to modeling space. So I think, the super informed of you might have known that originally it said in this talk that I'm going to talk about this, but I couldn't because of this, because it was just too much, just counting these numbers. And now I lost them. Oh, here it is. So that's why I was doing something else, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the last couple of minutes. And I will put this away. The next piece that I did is quite unrelated, and also on purpose unrelated to the topic of microtemporal decorrelation. And so I did a piece for 8-channel electronics that I premiered live at Sonic Matter a couple of weeks ago, which is called Massive Parallelism. And its approach to spatial sound is in a way quite the opposite to the specific choosing of delay times in 8 channels to bring about a spatial form. Instead, I borrowed a concept and kind of gave it my own name and twist from Pascal, who's sitting right here, and which is basically that it's super simple. You just parallelize all your synthesis and your treatment, which means for exactly the amount of loudspeakers that you have, that's exactly how many chains of the synthesizer you have in parallel. So if you have like a thing that produces one sound only, like, I don't know, some noise with a filter or something, you just have this 8 times if you are playing in an 8-channel context. This is how I understood it, this kind of concept. And it's not even really a concept, it's just duplication. But this thinking has, it's only really possible because of basically raw processing power. So I think the why this wasn't really done was live before, in the last 60 years, not before I did it, obviously. But it's basically because doing this live would have just incurred too much cost, either by having to buy a super strong computer or having to prepare everything, and then it's like not really live anymore. And indeed, the name like massive parallelism comes from massively parallel, which refers to basically the way how clusters of supercomputers perform their actions. So they are programmed in a way so that the workload is distributed over thousands of individual units that have to be coordinated. And yes, that's it. So that you can do everything like in time. You have to like organize thousands of little parts which are all running in parallel all at the same time, so that you don't waste resources. Of course, I don't have this constraint. Luckily, the only thing that I need to care about is like if there are buffer dropouts or something like this, because it's still quite CPU intensive. But of course, I don't. It's not really the same as parallel computing, where there are like very complicated considerations to take into account, because the tool that I'm using is doing this already for me. And this is the other important aspect, like the instrument is made in Max MSP, and since version 8, there's like this ability with the MC objects to basically you can have any process just run like super easily, just have like 8 versions of the same thing at the same time. And so you make just a normal Max patch for those that have worked with Max. And then you just make it a multi-channel object, and then you have automatically kind of encoded in this patch already a spatial form. And then what you can also do is you can then treat the different channels differently. Also, again, for example, with generative stuff. So you can, a super easy strategy would be to just kind of randomize in a musical way or in a non-trivial way the combinations of what the different channels are doing, and also like program in some interaction capability that you can have a knob of it, and that also does different things for each channel in an interesting way. So in concrete terms, I mean to say that like with this strategy, you don't need to spatialize in that sense anything. You're not thinking in this, for example, like the point model of ambisonics, where you have a point on a surface and you are calculating so as if it were that this point were there. It's already like inherent in the parallelism of the process that there is a spatiality. And the compositional task is basically choosing a way of interacting with the synthesis and the treatment of the sound in a way that generates a certain space that you want. It's not just, okay, you have 8 things and you leave them running and they're all kind of different, and that's why it's then it sounds like roomy. In the best case, you would try and find a way of doing it that actually generates a musically interesting space. You choose what kind of parameter you want to change on which channel, and also you can think of like how is it the Aufstellung, like how are people sitting in the space. Like for example here, what I did doesn't really make sense because we're all oriented to the front, and in the concert at Sonic Matter it was like a bit more like theater or like Greek theater style, where I unfortunately was exactly in the middle and everybody like in rings around me, which is a bit strange, but then it means that it kind of it sounds a bit more the same no matter where you sit. The only one who hears everything at the equal level is the performer, which is a bit unfair, but that's often how it is. And you have to think about this as well in your strategy, that you don't do then, if you know that everything is going to be circle focus and people are going to be sitting around you like this, that you don't do something that just doesn't work for half the people because the main loudspeakers are behind their ears or something. So yeah, I think we're gonna listen to an excerpt now. And just at the end of the piece, it's a bit of a longer excerpt again. But yeah, here we go. Thank you. Maybe to very quickly show what I mean, like with the different interaction modes that I have that make different kinds of space, or if I want a certain space, I make this kind of interaction. That was one part of the sound, was this module, which is like, it's kind of like a filter where every channel has a different band. It's a filter bank where every channel has a different band. And I can basically increase the bandwidth of the filters. I can do that manually, like this. This is what I did with a fader, not with the mouse. And then, okay, I have this delay as well, which answers kind of this thing. But I also can kind of, a different thing that I can do is this automatic. So this is like a tutti, and now I can do like more of like a point space where I just like do this automatically, and this is all parallel. I'm not coordinating anything. It's like hands off. It's like it just does the thing with these envelopes, and I can make them louder and I can make them more pointed. That's how I can like influence the dramaturgy, but where it happens, I don't really know. I just know that I want this kind of space that is a bit like wave-like with these overlapping motions, and it's like really nice when the overlapping happens, but it can also be sparse. It's also fine. And what I can't show now is, because I don't have the thing here, is that I can also control the bandwidth of each filter using faders. So I have 8 speakers, 8 bandwidths, 8 faders. Then again, I can say more closely where I want this thing to go, which is more, it's closer to acousmatic. So basically I have either a tutti or like this point space, or more like shaping the direction where it is, kind of. This is like the approach that I did, at least for this patch. Yeah. All right. Questions? And thanks for listening.
How many other sonic processes did you have for that last piece? Was that the only thing that you had, or were there other kind of modules that could?
At this moment, there was. So what I wasn't showing now because reasons, technical stuff, is that the piece is kind of organized around a feedback network, and this feedback network is just like it's just a normal delay line that goes into a reverb, that goes into like an EQ, and it goes through an all-pass filter section to make like I can kind of vary how feedbacky the feedback sounds by, for example, changing the reverb parameter in the feedback line. For example, the last, like these high, okay, that's a low one, sorry. This one, for example, the difference between this sound and the low one is basically just which parameter do I change in the reverb, in the delay line, and here it's like an EQ, and then you can almost play like the notes. And so this patch that I was showing, it was also going into the recirculating feedback. So like when I do this kind of bit over dramatic gesture in the end, the low feedback is already here because I was feeding this sound always into the feedback loop, but you weren't hearing it because like the dry signal was too loud. So, but then when I pull it away, it emerges kind of, even though it's not emerging, it was there. And apart from that, in that section, yeah, just these odd delays that like kind of mangle things up. But yeah, I can show the patch to anyone who cares at any time. It's like I'm not like a secret patch person. Yes. Everything crystal in that case.
How do you approach, especially, of course this is now a live performance, but it's got like the same path with your compositions where you have like the first one very sound design,
Yeah.
which I guess you'd think takes a lot of time to
Yes.
do the sounds, but also then you go more into the states and sound environments, kind of soundscapes. And
Yeah.
how is like the approach there? Do you think it takes as much detailing or work, or how is it kind of different?
You mean
Because I guess
live or in the studio?
in the studio and live, because
Mhm.
it's not like it's a different kind of, I guess, approach on how to compose like a sound event, and then you have, but
I think it comes down to a bit to it that it's a different kind of time, a different kind of like Zeitlichkeit that you have. You just have to, if you're doing quick sound design, you think if you're doing like a Transformers kind of sequence with like super quick like sound design things, you can, some things you don't have to control as tightly. On like some time scale, you, for example, you don't have to think about what is happening exactly in 7 seconds. You have to think about what is happening in 500 millisecond slices, kind of, because like it has to be like a movement, for example, like a movement or something. And if you're doing more landscape stuff, it's just a different time. You have to think about, okay, like this transition is a minute too short or something like this, and finding out how many seconds exactly something is too short or too long takes time. First of all, because you have to listen to longer stretches, and also because it's just, I mean, like doing crossfades is like super hard, as you know. Like getting crossfades exactly right and that kind of stuff just takes a super long time. And this was basically also a bit coming back to your question. Most of the time I was crossfading between stable states and just trying not to like do the mistake where it's just like a bit like sagging with the dynamics or something, and because if it's live, like you can't go back and change that. So I think that's like a bit the difference in how much work it takes, if that answers your question. Yeah.
Is this piece like enabling you or motivating you to play more live?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Because also I think there's definitely some things that I would change after playing it. Like I played it live for an audience once, and I'm not a person who does like a million iterations, because at some point I will start doing everything from scratch again, because I'm also not really a scrap saver, more of a scrap collector. I have like, as I said, all this stuff that I could one day use, but probably I will do it from scratch again. But I think this would be like more the process of doing more live pieces like that. I also think, okay, I have this, I play it 3 times and then I don't want to change it anymore. Then also I don't want to play it anymore maybe, and then I do a new thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely yes.
How did you actually, was it the same sort of field recording, kind of sound design, collage? As
this
the,
one?
As the baseline before the processing? Or?
Yes, in some parts, yeah, definitely. It was from a rehearsal of many sounds were from a rehearsal of a theater piece where I was doing sound projection and Martina was doing music, and I cut out moments that the performer was walking through a field blindfolded, and there were loudspeakers on the ground, and there were a lot of feedbacks, and they were really beautiful, like with a DPA Funk microphone and Genelec 8020 loudspeakers, and they were super, super beautiful in my opinion. And I first I wanted to actually do this like live, this kind of stuff, but I couldn't hack it. So I like just cut up the recordings and made a lot of different things that could process this. And sometimes it's just from scratch. Like this noise gamma tone filter thingy, it's just noise from an object, and then it goes into the filter, etc. So it's a bit more, or actually a lot more synthesis than the pieces, because in the pieces I'm working in Ableton, and I think for me it's a bit distracting then having to like crank out a max patch to do one specific thing. And in Ableton maybe the synthesis is not as flexible, so I don't really do a lot of synthesis except for sine waves. Yeah, so the thing is definitely there, like the material of field recordings is still present, but not in this moment of the piece. Good.